The pursuit of quiet was all I had left. It wasn't a desire. It was a necessity. The only prescription for a soul worn smooth by the abrasive reality of my former life. The house I bought in the ridiculously named Willow Creek Estates was my monastery. A beige stucco sanctuary on a street lined with meticulously manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. It was anonymity, suburban camouflage. I craved the drone of lawnmowers, the distant laughter of children, the sheer, beautiful, soul-healing monotony of it all. I was a man running from ghosts, and I figured ghosts didn't bother with homeowners associations. I was, of course, catastrophically wrong. My first encounter with the spectral warden of Willow Creek happened less than 24 hours after the moving truck pulled away. I was on my front step, nursing a lukewarm coffee in a ceramic mug that had survived the move, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of soft pink and orange. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and cut grass. It was perfect. Then, a shadow fell over me. "Good morning," a voice chirped, the sound as sharp and intrusive as a car alarm. I looked up. A woman stood on the sidewalk, positioned at a perfect, surveyor-approved distance from my property line. She was perhaps in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair so rigidly sprayed it looked like it could deflect small arms fire. She wore a pastel pink tracksuit that seemed to have been ironed while she was still in it. In her hands, she clutched a clipboard like a holy relic. "Morning," I replied, forcing a neighborly smile. "I'm Alex Carter. Just moved in." I started to stand, to offer a handshake, but her posture, a rigid column of disapproval, kept me seated. "I am aware," she said, her eyes not looking at me, but past me, at my house. They were small, calculating eyes, doing a rapid inventory of my existence. "I am Carolyn Masterson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." She announced the title as if it were a royal decree. I was just doing my morning rounds and I noticed a discrepancy. I followed her gaze. She was staring at my empty recycling bin, which I'd rolled to the curb the night before after unpacking a mountain of boxes. It was a standard-issue blue plastic bin. It looked exactly like every other bin on the street. "A discrepancy?" I asked, my coffee suddenly tasting bitter. "Bylaw 17 subsection C, paragraph 4, she recited, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her clipboard. "Waste receptacles must be placed no less than 12 inches and no more than 18 inches from the curb's edge. Furthermore, the lid's hinge must be oriented towards the residence." She took a step forward, her sneakers making no sound on the pavement. She leaned over, her body stiff, and peered down at my bin. "Yours is, I would estimate, 21 inches from the curb. And the hinge," she said with a dramatic sigh, "is facing the street. A clear violation." I blinked. I thought it was a joke. A weird, passive-aggressive welcome to the neighborhood gag. My face must have betrayed my confusion, because hers tightened. "This is not a laughing matter. Mr. Carter," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "The bylaws are the bedrock of our community. They protect our property values. They ensure uniformity, cleanliness, and order. Without order." She paused, letting the word hang in the quiet morning air. "We have chaos." My brain, a tool I had spent years sharpening for a very different purpose, began to spin. I instinctively started a threat assessment, a habit I was desperately trying to break. Subject: Carolyn Masterson, age late 50s, physical threat minimal, psychological profile, authoritarian personality, likely narcissistic tendencies, motivation power, control, weakness, Over-reliance on perceived authority. I mentally shoved the analysis away. Stop it. Alex, you're a civilian now, a homeowner. Just be normal. Right. Of course, I said, my voice sounding hollow. My apologies. First day. You know how it is. I'll fix it right away. I should hope so, she said, making a neat little checkmark on a form on her clipboard. This time, it's a courtesy warning. The next violation will incur a $50 fine, as per the established schedule. She gave the bin one last look of profound disappointment, as if it had personally betrayed her. Then her eyes flicked to the 2 empty moving boxes I had flattened and leaned against the side of my garage, waiting for trash day. And those, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Bylaw 22 subsection A. All refuse materials must be fully contained within the appropriate receptacle. No items may be left visible on the property. Those boxes are an eyesore. They suggest transience. We are a community of permanence. Mr. Carter. Before I could respond, she had pivoted on her heel and was marching down the street, her clipboard held firmly at her side. Later that evening, while on the phone with my sister, Sarah, I recounted the incident. "You're kidding," Sarah said, her lawyerly brain already dissecting the situation. "Over a recycling bin. She sounds like a nightmare." "You have no idea. The subject is a female, late 50s, presenting with classic signs of a dominant, controlling personality." "Alex, stop," Sarah cut in, her tone a familiar mix of amusement and exasperation. "You're not on the job anymore. You can't profile the neighbors. She's not a subject. She's just a busybody. Try to play nice." "I am playing nice," I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "But I've got a feeling my definition of nice and hers are going to be very different." My search for peace had led me directly into the crosshairs of a petty tyrant in a pink tracksuit. The ghosts I was running from were violent and dangerous, but at least they were honest about it. This was something different. This was a war of inches, a battle of bylaws, and I had a sinking feeling that for Carolyn Masterson, it was the only war that mattered. The first official salvo in Carolyn's war of attrition arrived a week later. It came in a crisp, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo, placed directly in my mailbox, which was a violation of federal law regarding mail tampering. But I decided to let that particular detail slide for the moment. Inside, printed on heavy cardstock, was a formal violation notice. My crime, meticulously detailed with photographic evidence, was improper lawn maintenance, Flora height violation. Apparently, a patch of clover near my driveway had grown to the staggering height of 4.25 inches, a full quarter of an inch over the maximum 3-inch height stipulated in the landscape and grounds mandates. The fine was $50. Enclosed was a glossy, high-resolution photo of the offending clover, with a small red arrow pointing to the tallest leaf. Someone, and I had no doubt who, had come onto my property with a ruler. My first reaction was a tired laugh. It was absurd. In my old life, a quarter of an inch could be the difference between a bullet hitting a vital organ or passing harmlessly through tissue. Here, it was a $50 fine. I called Sarah again that night. "Pay it," she advised immediately. "Don't give her an easy win by being defiant over something so small. But this is step 1. From now on, you document everything. Create a digital file. Scan the notice, the photo, the canceled check. Create a paper trail. If this escalates, a pattern of harassment is your best weapon." "You think it's going to escalate?" I asked, already knowing the answer. People like that don't stop, she said grimly. They push until they find a boundary, and then they try to knock it down. Just be methodical. You're good at that. Following her advice, I paid the fine and spent the next Saturday on my hands and knees, pulling every last bit of clover from my lawn with the focus of a bomb disposal technician. I mowed the lawn twice, lowering the blade height each time, until it was as uniform and lifeless as a military haircut. The next violation was unauthorized garden ornamentation. The small, tasteful Japanese maple tree I had planted in a stone planter near my front door was an unapproved permanent landscape alteration. Another $50 fine. This one stung more. The tree was a memorial of sorts, a quiet nod to a partner I'd lost. I complied by the book, writing a detailed, polite letter to the Architectural Review Committee I.D. Carolyn, formally requesting permission. My request was denied, citing that the tree's deciduous nature could lead to excessive leaf litter. The fines kept coming, each one more ludicrous than the last. My garden hose was improperly coiled. I had left my garage door open for an excessive duration, 12 minutes. My welcome mat was non-standard in its color palette. I paid every fine. I corrected every violation, and with each one, I followed Sarah's advice, meticulously scanning and saving every document into a folder on my encrypted laptop labeled HOA Comms. In my head, I called it the Carolyn file. It was getting thick. I was playing by her rules, but I was also preparing for a different game entirely, one based on the rules of evidence. The transition from bureaucratic harassment to tangible aggression came on a Tuesday morning. The air was thick with the promise of summer rain. I walked out to get my morning paper and saw it immediately. My Japanese maple, the one I had refused to remove while my appeal was under review, was dying. Its delicate, wine-red leaves were curled and brown at the edges. A strange, chemical odor, sharp and acrid like bleach, tainted the morning air around the stone planter. I knelt and touched a leaf. It crumbled to dust. Someone had poured a chemical into the planter to kill the tree from the roots up. A cold, familiar rage began to smolder in my chest. This wasn't a fine. This was a direct, physical act of vandalism. It was deniable, cowardly, and deeply personal. It was a message. My first instinct was to canvass the area, look for footprints, scrape a soil sample. But I forced myself to stop, to think strategically. A police report would be my word against hers and go nowhere. A direct confrontation would be pointless. This was when I made a decision. Peace didn't mean being a doormat. It was time to introduce a few of my old skills into my new life. That afternoon, I went to a specialty electronics supplier across town. I spent the next 2 days installing my own security system. It wasn't an off-the-shelf doorbell camera. I installed 4 low-light, high-definition pinhole cameras. One was concealed in a new, decorative birdhouse overlooking my front lawn. Another was disguised as a screw head on my garage light fixture. A third I embedded in the trunk of a large oak tree in my front yard, focused directly on the planter. My next-door neighbor, Tom, saw me on a ladder by the oak tree, putting up a bird feeder. Alex, he asked, trying to be friendly. Something like that, I replied smoothly, not pausing in my work. Trying to get a look at that woodpecker that's been going at my gutters. Thought I'd see what I can catch. My movements were efficient, precise, born of years of practice setting up surveillance. I scanned the street, noting lines of sight, blind spots, potential approaches. Tom just nodded, but I saw a flicker of puzzlement in his eyes. It was probably a little too much effort for a woodpecker. That evening, I was reviewing the setup when I overheard a conversation from the street. It was Carolyn, talking to her friend Brenda. their voices carrying on the still evening air. "I absolutely will not let what happened at the firm happen here," Carolyn was saying, her voice tight with a strange, venomous resentment. "They didn't appreciate my methods, my dedication to order. They called me rigid. They chose chaos. And look what happened to them. This community will have order. I will make sure of it." The words hung in the air. It was a keyhole view into her psyche. This wasn't just about power. It was about redemption. She was refighting a battle she had already lost somewhere else. Willow Creek was her chance to prove that her way, the way of absolute, rigid control, was the right way. And I was the chaos she needed to eliminate. I added a new note to the Carolyn file, detailing the conversation I'd overheard. Her motivation was becoming clearer. It wasn't just malice. It was pathology. And that made her infinitely more dangerous. The social attack began, as I expected, in the digital town square, the Willow Creek Estates Community Forum on Facebook. Carolyn's first move was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive slander, a post about newer residents and neglected properties, where landscaping unfortunately dies off due to lack of care. It was a brilliant piece of propaganda, twisting her own act of vandalism into a mark against my character. The comments section filled with praise for her vigilance. The effect was immediate. The few friendly nods I'd been getting from neighbors ceased. I was being systematically isolated. The online campaign escalated. A new post appeared warning about individuals spending an unusual amount of time just watching. She was painting me as a potential criminal, a creep. One afternoon, I was cleaning my gutters when my phone rang. It was a generic, nondescript ringtone, but I recognized the caller ID, a scrambled series of numbers. I answered, my back to the street. "Go for Carter," I said, my voice low and clipped. The voice on the other end was tinny, but the protocol was familiar. I responded in kind. "No, the package is secure. No hostiles on my 6. Situation is green." I paused, listening. "Understood. Carter out." I hung up and turned around to see Tom getting his mail. He had overheard me, and his face was a mask of confusion and alarm. A civilian hearing that conversation would think it was gibberish, or maybe a prank call. But it wasn't the kind of gibberish you forget. "Wrong number," I said with a flat, dismissive nod. I went back to my gutters, leaving him to wonder what kind of person gets calls about hostiles and packages. The seed of a different kind of doubt was planted. I wasn't just the weirdo who let his trees die. I was something else. Something he couldn't categorize. The whispers would start, but they wouldn't be the whispers Carolyn was orchestrating. I called Sarah that night. "She's libeling me on a community Facebook page," I told her, painting me as a neglectful, potentially criminal presence. "Screenshot everything," she commanded. "Every post, every comment, every like. In libel cases, you have to prove malice and damage to your reputation. She is handing you a perfectly documented case of both. Just keep letting her talk. She's digging her own grave." I followed her instructions, saving meticulous records of the online smear campaign. The Carolyn file was becoming a detailed study in psychological manipulation, and my sister's legal guidance was ensuring every piece of evidence was collected in a way that would be admissible and devastating. Having successfully poisoned my social standing, Carolyn weaponized official authorities. The first visit was from a weary-looking code enforcement officer about a phantom noise complaint. I handled it calmly, and the officer, Frank Miller, practically told me he knew it was a malicious call from the HOA president, who enjoys using our department to settle her personal scores. I got his name and documented the entire encounter. 2 weeks later, it was 2 police officers at my door for a wellness check. A neighbor, they said, was concerned they hadn't seen me in days. I had mowed my lawn the day before. It was another transparent, malicious lie, designed to create a public spectacle. "Officers," I said calmly, "I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. I'm guessing the concerned neighbor is the HOA president, Carolyn Masterson. This is the second time in a month a city agency has been called to my house on a false pretense." I saw the younger officer bristle, but the older one, a sergeant, gave a knowing sigh. I got their names and badge numbers, Sort Miller and Officer Davis. After they left, I immediately called Sarah. "This is it, Alex," she said, her voice sharp with legal focus. "This is the line. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense. She has now escalated from civil harassment to actual crimes. You have the names of the officers. They are now witnesses. This isn't just about the HOA anymore. She's breaking the law, and you have impartial, credible witnesses to the fact." "So what's the next move?" I asked. "We wait," she said. "She's on a roll. She thinks she's untouchable. She's going to make one more mistake, a bigger one, and when she does, we'll have her. Just keep your head down and your cameras on." Her words were a cold comfort. The sight of the police car in my driveway had solidified my reputation as a problem in the eyes of my neighbors. Carolyn's narrative was winning, but Sarah was right. The endgame was getting closer. Carolyn was overplaying her hand, and the trap I was patiently building, with Sarah's legal guidance, was about to have a crucial piece of evidence placed squarely within it. The final escalation was both shockingly bold and deeply stupid. She came for my past, for my livelihood itself. She confronted me in my open garage on a Saturday morning, brandishing her phone like a weapon. "I've been doing some digging on you, Mr. Carter," she sneered. "I found your previous employment, a security consultant for a logistics company. I also found articles about a major internal theft ring at that same company about 2 years ago. An inside job. And then, poof, you disappear." My blood ran cold. She was clumsy, but she had stumbled into the right forest. The logistics company was a deep cover operation. The theft ring was the organized crime syndicate we had been dismantling. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice a low, threatening whisper. "You're going to sell your house. If you don't, I have the number for the head of corporate security at your old company. I'm going to tell him that a disgruntled former employee who left under a cloud of suspicion is exhibiting threatening and unstable behavior in my neighborhood. I'll suggest they reopen their investigation." In her monologue, her personal wound bled through. "I built this community from nothing, just like I built my department at the firm. They pushed me out, said I was too rigid. They didn't understand that rules are what protect us from chaos. I won't let you bring your chaos here. I will protect this place, no matter what it takes." She was threatening to burn down my cover story, a move that would trigger a dozen red flags at a federal agency and bring a world of bureaucratic nightmare down on my head. It was extortion. It was the final mistake Sarah had predicted. The part of me that was trying to be civilian Alex died right there on the concrete floor of my garage. All that was left was the man she had unknowingly been tormenting. I looked at her, my face empty of all emotion except a flat, cold, professional assessment. "I heard you, Carolyn," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You're threatening to make a false report to my former employer in an attempt to extort me into selling my home. As my lawyer has already advised me, that's a serious felony." The mention of a lawyer made her flinch, just for a second. It was a variable she hadn't accounted for. Before she could recover, I turned my back on her, walked to my workbench, and picked up my phone. I scrolled to a number listed simply as Sarge. He picked up on the first ring. "Carter, I was wondering when you'd call." "Sarge," I said, my voice calm and clear, never taking my eyes off Carolyn's now pale face. "The civilian way isn't working. It's time to set the trap. And I need you to be here for it. It's going to be a public event." The stage for the final act was the Willow Creek Estates annual summer block party. It was Carolyn's magnum opus. This year, she intended for it to be the site of my public humiliation. She had no idea it was going to be the stage for her own destruction. My call to Sarge had set things in motion. He and I planned the final play meticulously. The centerpiece was my car, a silver Toyota Camry, the same make, model, and color as Carolyn's. Mine was a 2018. Hers was a 2020. The only obvious difference was a small but distinct scratch on my rear passenger side door. That had to disappear. The morning of the party, I was in my garage. It wasn't sawdust in the air, but the faint chemical smell of car wax. I had bought a tube of color-matched polish and filler. I spent a full hour carefully applying it to the scratch, filling, smoothing, and buffing until the blemish was functionally invisible from more than 5 feet away. Good enough for a high-stress, low-light situation, I murmured to myself. Step 1 was complete. Step 2 was positioning. I waited. I watched the early arrivals for the party set up, their cars filling the designated spots. Carolyn parked her pristine Camry in her driveway. As always, I waited for the perfect spot on the street to open up one directly under the harsh glare of the 3 o'clock sun, angled in such a way that the light would reflect off the passenger side, further obscuring any minor imperfections. When a family finally pulled out, I backed my car into the spot with practiced precision. The trap was baited. The party was in full swing when Sarge arrived, dressed in a simple polo shirt and slacks. He looked like someone's friendly uncle. He gave me a subtle nod and then blended in, grabbing a paper plate and making small talk. He was my witness. At 2:55 p.m., I made my move. I walked calmly to my car. I unlocked it, got in, and started the engine. Carolyn saw it. This was her moment. She strode toward the center of the street. "Stop!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the music like a siren. "Everyone, he's stealing my car." The entire party froze. All heads turned. "That man!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Alex Carter. He's a criminal. He's stealing my car. Somebody call 911. One of her loyalists was already on the phone. I just sat in my car, engine idling. 2 patrol cars arrived in under 3 minutes. The officers got out, hands hovering near their sidearms. "Sir, step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," the first officer commanded. Showtime. I stepped out slowly, hands raised. "Officer Daniels, calm down," I said. The officer faltered. "Do I know you?" "We haven't been formally introduced," I said, slowly reaching for my wallet and credentials. "Detective Alex Carter, Major Crimes Division, Auto Theft Task Force, currently on extended administrative leave." I flipped open my badge case. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Carolyn's face had gone slack, the color draining from her cheeks. "It's a trick," she stammered. Right on cue. Sarge stepped forward. "He's not a fake," Sarge said, showing his own credentials. "I'm Captain Mike Ramsey, Detective Carter's commanding officer. "Gentlemen," he said to the two patrol officers, "what you've walked into is the culmination of a months-long civilian investigation into a pattern of targeted harassment and, as of 2 minutes ago, the filing of a false police report." Sarge turned to the stunned crowd. "You all thought he was some paranoid recluse. Some of you overheard him on the phone talking code." He looked at Tom, whose eyes went wide. "That's how officers on leave stay in touch with their units. You thought he was just putting up a birdhouse." He gestured to my oak tree. "That was a detective legally securing a crime scene on his own property after it was vandalized. This woman," he said, his voice booming as he pointed at Carolyn, "has been systematically tormenting a decorated police officer for months." I finally turned my gaze to Carolyn. "My car," I said, gesturing to the vehicle I stood beside, "is a 2018 Toyota Camry, VIN, ending in 8472. The scratch you might remember is currently concealed under a heavy coat of wax, something easily removed. Your car," I pointed to her driveway, "is a 2020 model, VIN, ending in 5519. You knew exactly which car this was. You just saw an opportunity to escalate." Sarge delivered the final blow. "And Carolyn, when you threatened to call his old company and make a report, you were threatening to interfere in a federal investigation. My detective has you on tape. That's a whole different level of felony. You're not just an HOA president anymore. You're a material witness and a potential co-conspirator." The word felony hung in the hot summer air. Carolyn Masterson stood frozen, her world dismantled in the space of 5 minutes. She looked from my face, to my badge, to Sarge, and finally to the faces of her neighbors, who were now staring at her not with admiration, but with dawning horror and contempt. The trap had been sprung. The resolution was swift and mercilessly efficient. As Officer Daniels and his partner cuffed a sputtering, incoherent Carolyn Masterson, Sarge was already on the phone with the district attorney's office. The Carolyn file, now co-signed by my sister Sarah as my legal counsel, was an open and shut case, faced with overwhelming, legally vetted evidence. Carolyn pleaded guilty to a litany of charges, filing a false police report, stalking, vandalism, and extortion. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a mandatory psychological evaluation and anger management course, a hefty fine, and was issued a permanent restraining order. Her reign was over. The social consequences were just as devastating. The community forum exploded. Tom came to my house the next day and apologized, specifically mentioning the weird phone call about hostels that had scared him. "I get it now," he said, shamefaced. "You were just being you." An emergency HOA meeting was held. The board resigned. A new, reasonable board was elected. They promptly went through the bylaws and, with my anonymous consultation, gutted all the petty controlling rules. My request for the Japanese maple was retroactively approved, and the HOA paid for a new one. I finally found the peace I had been looking for. The mornings were quiet. The nods from neighbors were genuine. The beige monotony I had craved returned. But this time, it felt like a comfort. My ghosts were quieter now, soothed by the simple, suburban order I had fought to protect. I was no longer just the strange recluse. I was Alex, the guy at the end of the street who, as the neighborhood legend now went, you really shouldn't mess with. And that was a reputation I could live with.